In your discussion, you can get creative. Just not flowery, but creative. Yes. Okay, so question 5, really 4, but since I skipped the number 4, it's listed as question 5 on here, or hypothesis 5, that pretreatment depression and self-esteem scores will be related to decreases in ADHD. So what is that asking you to do? Okay, correlation, because this relationship. And what variables are we going to include in that correlation? Yes. Yeah, they're just numbers. Okay, so good. So how did we create our ADHD score? Our difference score. Okay, so an ADHD difference score of 1 means what? That there was a decrease or an increase in the scores? There was a decrease. So that column, yeah, that tells you if there was a decrease. That tells you how big the decrease was. And if there's a negative number, like right here, what does that tell you? That's a bad thing. And it actually increased. Do what? So just not even looking at self-esteem at this point, we're just looking at what these scores mean. So a negative difference score for ADHD difference means the person actually had an increase in symptoms. A positive score means there was a decrease in symptoms. Okay, so we'll run the correlation and then we'll think through that again, because then you have to think how that all plays out with the correlation. Okay, so analyze, correlate, bivariate, and what are our variables that we're putting in here? Okay, so depression, yeah, self-esteem, and then the ADHD difference score that we created, not the achievement difference, but the ADHD difference. Okay. Mm-hmm.
The ADHD difference score, right?
Yes. So depression, self-esteem, and ADHD difference. Okay, so is everybody there? Okay. So let's look at our chart. Okay. So there's a significant correlation between self-esteem and depression. And it's a significant negative correlation. So what does that mean? Right. And does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. How about, so what was the hypothesis? Yes, to ADHD change scores. So, or yeah, and the significance that we found is not answering the hypothesis. So, really, to answer that hypothesis, you're not even going to report this significant correlation. Well, no. Right, and what do correlations do? Can you combine stuff in bivariate correlations? No. Right. Is depression related to how much people change in ADHD? And is separately self-esteem related to how much people change in ADHD? What would we, from what we've learned so far, if we wanted to look at the combined effects of depression and self-esteem on change score, what would we have to do? A regression. We'd have to turn it into a prediction and do a multiple regression. Good job. Okay, so So, okay, so what's the question? It's really two questions in that one hypothesis. What's one of them? Okay, so one question is, is depression related to the change in ADHD scores? Okay, so where do we look to answer that question? Is depression? Yes, that's a no. It's not significant. What's our second question? And so there's our answer right there. Is it? No. So there you go. Okay. And so for that hypothesis, you would then report both of those non-significant numbers in order to test the hypothesis that each of these will be related to change. If it's asking about a relationship, and all the variables are continuous, then right now what that means for you is bivariate correlations. If the word were prediction, then that's different. And so then if the word were prediction, I would need to be more clear. Like I would need to say if they independently predict or if they predict when you combine them. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, Becky.
So when you started pointing out the different scores on the ADHD column in our data set, I thought, okay, she's going to have us exclude the ones that were not decreases because the question asked about decreases.
Okay. So here's, I'm glad Becky asked that. So here, and that's really, really important. Because people do that all the time. And there's a great example that I'm gonna get wrong because I don't have it sitting in front of me and I haven't looked at it in years, but there's a great example from like NASA, where they would send these probes or rockets or whatever into space, and sometimes they would blow up, And so they were trying to look at a correlation between temperature and if that was related to when the things would blow up. And they were like, oh, well, we just want to know if high temperatures are related to when it blows up. So let's get rid of all the ones when there was a low temperature. You can't do that. You can't do that because that limits the variability in your data set. So it's like if we say, this comes up all the time, people will say, how do you know, like, so we have a GRE score that you have to get into grad school. And people will say, well, we need to test if their GRE scores really are related to their success in grad school. So we want you to get everybody's GRE score who's in your grad school and correlate it with their GPA. I can do that, but I'm going to get non-significance. Why am I going to get and that doesn't mean that GRE doesn't predict success. Why am I going to get non-significance if I do that? Because I don't have anybody with a low GRE score who didn't succeed. So I don't know if they're related. Like I have very little variability. Everybody in here is going to have GRE scores that are pretty close, and y'all are all going to have GPAs that are pretty close. So unless I had a full range of GREs, like if I let anybody with any GRE score into the grad program and then got their GPAs, I probably would find significance because the people who did horrible on the GRE probably are the ones who fail out of grad school. Okay. But when I limit it, when I cut off and I say, well, I'm only going to look at the top level, these people, there's not enough variance to see if it's related. So they kept finding no correlation, no correlation, no correlation, and they kept saying temperature doesn't matter. Until somebody was like, yeah, but you didn't include any of the data with the cold temperature. And then they put that in and it was strongly related. Because then they could tell, oh, yeah, those are, if you put in all hot temperatures and sometimes there was a blow up and sometimes there wasn't, you can't tell anything. So if you only put in the decreases, and you're trying to relate that to whatever, self-esteem, you don't have the full range of change scores. So you can't tell if it's related.
Even though it's related to decreases,
You're still looking at the full data because the only way you know if it's related to decreases is if you also have the increases in there. It's kind of like if I want to know what did we do last time? If height and weight, is that what we did? We want to know if height and weight are related. But if I only take tall people and I run a correlation, I'm going to get non-significance. But that doesn't mean that height and weight are not related. It means I have limited my variability in height, so I can't see the relationship in there to even tell.